worker talking on the phone with a customer where he assures them that their requests have been noted and their issues will be resolved in 3 days. He tells us how he works in the advertising department of Grand Glory Limited. It's a big company that everyone knows about and that this person's entire life has just been clogged up with work. The man lets out a sigh as he talks to himself that he nailed the work, but his happiness is short-lived as a fat-suited man walks up to him and calls him by his name, Howard. We learn that the company Howard works at is going through some rough days and they're laying off workers, so the man tells him he should start working harder if he doesn't want to be laid off too. Hearing the news about the layoffs shock Howard, but he doesn't have time to think as the boss hands him a file, telling him to call every name on the list as their potential clients. As Howard calls clients, people rebuke him by asking him what he wants from them. They have never owned a VR product before and they aren't even his client. Howard tries to assure them that based on the company's data and calculations, they're the perfect candidate for their dream tests. Intrigued, the customer asks about what the dream tests are, so Howard explains that the customer will be made the tester of the company's specially made Dreamland, where they can encounter many different life experiences like a high-end version of a VR video game. However, the customer tells Howard that he should leave as they've got work to do and they do not have time for this craziness. Howard still doesn't give up and tells him that the system has a function that can bring the duplicate of anyone from real life into the Dreamland and the customer can decide what will happen to them. Howard asks the customer if they don't want to try living as a different person as they must not be satisfied with what they have right now. But his attention is diverted as the office room door opens and a black-haired lady enters the room, accompanied by his boss from before. The boss introduces the girl as Miss Luo, who is now their new director, so the company workers greet her enthusiastically. The boss then goes to a worker and introduces him to Miss Luo, praising him as a person who's helped him a lot as the team leader of the advertising department. Miss Luo tells the worker it's great to have him in their department, but Howard looks at what's going on and remembers that this worker has gotten this high position by just kissing the boss butt and praising him excessively. Proving Howard's point, the worker immediately starts praising Mr. Wang and how it's a blessing to have him as a boss. This piques Miss Luo's interest and so Mr. Wang introduces her to the rest of the company's staff. As this goes on, Miss Luo notices Howard sitting afar all by himself, so she calls out to him and asks Howard about himself. The surprised Howard stands up and greets her, but as he's about to tell her his name, Mr. Wang shows up and interrupts him. Mr. Wang tells Miss Luo that Howard is just a nobody with mediocre ability, bad interpersonal communication skills, and that he's someone she shouldn't waste her time on. After listening to the boss explanation, Miss Luo says that she understands, leaving after telling everyone to have a great evening. As she leaves, a nervous worker looks at what had just happened speechlessly. Later, outside of the building as the workers wave each other goodbyes, Howard talks to the worker from before, telling him how he thought that if he worked hard enough he would be recognized, but life just hasn't turned out like he hoped it would. The worker tells Howard that he needs to choose a side, and that he's told him many times before that it'd benefit him to flatter the boss. Howard recalls how his friend used to be different back in their college days, as we see a flashback where the boy calls out to his fellow students to refuse the teacher's urge for votes, as their job is to just study there. Just as Howard's friend sits in the taxi, Mr. Wang and Miss Luo exit the building, and we see Mr. Wang telling Miss Luo that she didn't have any need to waste her time on the lowly workers in the department as it has delayed a lot of her work tomorrow now. The calm Miss Luo assures him that it's fine and she knows what she's doing. Mr. Wang continues that Miss Luo has given the workers some mixed signals that could lead to some of them thinking they can bite off more than they can chew. As the nervous Howard listens to them, Mr. Wang announces that if someone hasn't figured out who he is and what he should do, they'll be sacked. This makes something snap within Howard as he realizes that hard work doesn't pay well. As he's suffered through so much discrimination, he's had enough. Meanwhile, a device says out that it seems Howard has thought it through. Howard continues his thoughts from before, finally deciding to hand in his resignation. However, he still needs something to vent his anger. He tells the device to bring the duplicates of Sabrina Luo and Mr. Wang to the Dreamland, but the device tells him there's an error in instruction. The system can only scan one person at a time, so based on the order sequence it will scan Sabrina Luo first. Howard is left shocked as the system finishes the scanning and announces Sabrina Luo's character creation. Back at his apartment, Howard starts ranting to the system why didn't it tell him before, and that it had a limitation of scanning only one person at a time as it left him unprepared. The system replies that it has detected a sharp increase of dopamine with Howard's brain, and that it concludes he must be enjoying this. Howard retorts that the system is annoying and that he had just thought it'd be good to have a woman NPC servant in the game. The system ignores his defense and tells Howard that the Dreamland will only activate at midnight, so he'll need to find a place to sleep until then. However, as he's too excited, Howard is unable to sleep the whole time as he was too nervous. But the system tells Howard there's no problem as it already anticipated this kind of situation among clients. To deal with Howard's current predicament, the system will interfere with his sleep-brain tissue system and cause him to fall asleep. And just like that, as the system shines on Howard, he immediately falls asleep snoring out loud. On the floor, Howard wakes up with a headache and he's greeted by a woman who calls him by his name and tells him that they've finally met. Howard asks her who she is, so she replies that she's the AI assistant who was talking to him all along. She's also the administrator of the Dreamland system, and as we see her choker show the number 63, she tells Howard that he can call her AI 63. Howard asks her if the battle has started yet, so the AI replies that no, it hasn't started yet. She tells Howard that supplies are always needed for a tough battle, and that there's a shop where he can buy things with his credit points. AI 63 then waves her staff and a door with the sign number 1 opens up. Inside is a glass display with a combat knife inside it. AI 63 informs Howard that this military knife is worth 2 credits, and then she walks him through the shop inventory showing him a variety of other items. She tells him that the 100-ton truck costs 40 points, a temperature-controlled coat costs 20 points, and a pack of compressed food costs 1 point. As they're walking, Howard spots a casing and runs towards it, where he exclaims that it's an endless power battery which is golden for him. When Howard reaches out to grab it, AI 63 smacks his hand with her staff and tells him he can only touch it if he intends on buying it, as it's just put there for show. AI-63 further explains to him that once Howard passes a challenge, he'll gain credit points which he can use to buy these items. She then tells him that since the challenges will become more difficult later on, Howard should spend his points lightly. Howard thanks her for telling him how the shop works. Then he further inquiries about the NPC system and if there are any strong NPCs. AI-63 points at herself and lights up, telling Howard that 1,000 credit points are taken and that she's at his service. Howard tells her that that's blatant robbery, but AI-63 ignores him and continues on, saying that the Dreamland will now be activated. AI-63 tells Howard to have fun as she shows him a door with a big sign saying Doomsday Survival, leaving Howard to question what that is. Leaving him no time to think. With a loud boom, a bright light shines on him through the door. Waking up suddenly, Howard is surprised to find himself back inside his own apartment room. He's surprised to see that he's back at his home and that nothing has changed at all. He ridicules himself for not having thought about this already, and that technology still can't be advanced enough to create a whole world out of nothing. He decides to freshen up and goes to the bathroom where he's unable to turn on the lights as the power is out. Howard then gets dressed and leaves the apartments through the stairs, but as he gets outside he sees that all of the streets are barren. He questions where all of the people gone to, but his thoughts are cut short as he looks up at a plane soaring right above him. Shocking him, the same plane goes and crashes right next to him. Howard hides behind a car, where he realizes that everything is weird about his current situation. Then the system starts announcing that the Mimic Dreamland Doomsday Survival has started. It tells Howard that the difficulty level is currently at 0, and that he has 180 days left to fight this battle, shocking him even further. However, his surprise is cut short as he notices an oil leak in the car right next to him, making him sprint off to save his skin as the car explodes behind him. Recalling when the airplane struck the building from before, Howard starts analyzing the situation and he tells us that what had just happened isn't so weird as it's a dreamland set in a world where people suddenly disappeared, so planes would obviously come crashing down. Howard continues that 180 days might seem like a long span of time, but he can survive it if he accumulates enough supplies. He tells himself that he can use these 180 days to plan out his life after resignation, but also have some fun while he can. Clicking the go button on a loudspeaker, Howard lifts it over his shoulder as he ventures off into a menswear shop where he gets some nice new clothes. He then goes to a jewelry shop where he gets some jewelry for himself and a bar where he gets a bottle of alcohol. With his new thug-like appearance, Howard marches through the city, but then he remembers that he has a duplicate Sabrina Luo as his assistant, so he asks the system when will she show up as he hasn't seen her yet. Hearing some footsteps, Howard thinks that maybe it's her coming to him right as he's called for her, but he's disappointed to find it was a dog instead. He knows it makes sense that all pets would be unleashed now as their owners have disappeared. Howard continues wondering where Sabrina Luo is and he questions if the game developer has tricked him using her. However, Howard's worries are cut short as he spots a tiger walking up to him. He begs the tiger not to get close to him as he had just washed his face, but the tiger ignores him, coming up to Howard and licking his face. Howard remembers that this tiger is called Dummy, the only carnivore in the local petting zoo. It's said that this tiger was raised by the zookeepers so it's friendly with humans, leading to many tourists having come to take pictures with it. Howard continues that this tiger has a recognizable feature which is a heavily depilated butt and that it must have left the zoo as all the zookeepers have gone missing. Amazed, Howard thinks to himself that the game developer is amazing as not even the smallest detail has been overlooked. 7 days later, Howard realizes that the challenge has been harder than he'd initially thought. Equipped with a gas mask, he runs out of a grocery store with a pack of water bottles and he continues explaining that now the water supply has been cut off so he has to rely on bottled water in supermarkets. Without power for refrigeration, meat products and vegetables begin to rot as maggots are everywhere. Howard continues that he found some hardtack so he won't starve, but a lack of vitamins could get him in trouble so he's not sure how much longer he can hold up. Later that day, Howard talks about how lucky he is as it seems that God had heard his woes. He enters a building with the sign, Blue Sky Restaurant, where he spots a diesel generator. Howard recalls how his own father owned a grocery store and it had this kind of generator as well. Seeing that the generator is hot as hell, Howard figures out it must have been running for 7 days or more, so it could break down at any minute. If he had come to this restaurant any later, he would have been totally out of power, and the frozen meat in the restaurant fridge would have gone bad as well. Seeing that the restaurant contains both a generator and a fridge, Howard makes up his mind to live there. He then plans that during daytimes he will now gather all the supplies he can find, and during nighttime, he will get rid of the rotten meat and cultivate some land for food. Putting his plan into motion, he immediately takes a pickaxe and starts working on some land in the restaurant. On day 31, Howard drives a car as he asks himself what he's going to do today. Seated next to him, his friend replies that Howard needs to find a farm store that sells seeds as it's disgusting to pick seeds out of rotten vegetables. Howard replies that he's right, but he's just now come up with a better plan. A plan where he plans on killing himself by letting go of the steer wheel. As the car crashes and he dies, he'll finally wake up and have everything again. Howard's friend tries to comfort him, telling him how the garlic plants have just sprouted today and that it's been over half a month so he will finally have some fresh vegetables. Howard retorts that he isn't suicidal because of the stupid vegetables. Rather, the city is buried in poop and flies are everywhere. It's like he's living in that same extraction pit. Whenever he sleeps, he feels like there are maggots crawling out of his ears. At night, it's too dark for Howard to see anything and the loneliness has become suffocating. He feels as if the entire world has abandoned him. Howard's friend continues lecturing him and tells him that he can quit the game but not reality. He asks Howard if he's got any skills that can earn him money as he's got little perseverance, questioning his ability to support himself after resigning. He concludes his lecture and gives Howard the advice that he's the one playing the game. The game isn't the one playing him so he should wake up. Sweating, Howard remarks that even in a game his friend is trying to persuade him to give in to reality. With the conversation concluded, a light flashes at Howard's face and he takes a sharp break as he spots another car. Within the other car is Miss Luo, who exchanges a worried look with Howard as her car crashes onto another parked car. This leaves Howard surprised to finally see Sabrina Luo. As her eyes open and she wakes up, Sabrina Luo notices that her wounds have been patched up and that she's now wearing men's clothes. She questions where is right now and leaves the room where she had just woken up. As she exits the room, she notices a diesel generator running and fresh food on the table. Luo then comes across Howard, who tells her that now that she is awake she should have something to eat the food on the table which he has cooked for her. At the dinner table, Luo talks to Howard and tells him she still remembers him. They had met at a dinner after work so she wants to know his name. Surprised that she knows him, Howard replies and tells her his name, amazed that the system even copied the memories of the original Sabrina. Curious, Sabrina further asks Howard if he made this shelter so capable with all of the electricity, food and shelter, but Howard replies he was just lucky as he has a vegetable garden and that he cultivated some land. He then asks Sabrina how she has been faring over the past month. She replies that she had gone back to her hometown but that the people there were gone as well. Howard is the only person she has seen the entire month and she's confused about what has happened to the world. Finally, Howard realizes why he hasn't seen Sabrina the entire month, so he replies that he doesn't know what has happened and would like to know her plan. Sabrina replies that she doesn't really have a plan, so Howard thinks to himself that according to game rules he should invite her to team up with him now. Howard suggests Sabrina to start living with him since he can take care of her when she gets sick and he's got all of the necessary facilities available here which would allow her to have a much better life than before. Sabrina agrees since she has no choice and Howard acknowledges that this is all happening according to standard gameplay. However, Sabrina tells Howard that she wants to give him a notice before they start living together. Howard asks her what it is so she tells him that he isn't her type so she hopes that there will be some distance between them when they live together. This frustrates Howard and he thinks to himself why Sabrina is stressing this point so much. He thinks to himself that he desperately needs a friend but that's only because he wants someone to talk to, instead of talking to mannequins and pretending they're real people. Howard remembers his interaction with his boss in the office and questions why do people like Sabrina judge others before they even get to know them. Collecting his thoughts, Howard tells Sabrina that her request sounds fine so he agrees. Sabrina continues that she won't be a freeloader and will perform the housework while Howard goes outside to work. Howard agrees once again and tells her to get some rest for tomorrow as they'll start working then. As he's leaving the table, Howard tries to calm down his anger and takes deep breaths. He reminds himself that this is just a game that has nothing to do with real life and it's understandable for a girl to want some space for themselves. The next day Howard wakes up to some loud noises and questions what Sabrina must be doing so early in the day. Outside of his room, he's speechless to find a ton of boxes in the open. He calls out to Sabrina and asks what she's doing so she tells him that she just cleaned up the warehouse to make her own bed bedroom. Sabrina then points to a walkie-talkie attached to the wall and tell Howard to use it if he ever wants to contact her while she's in her room, upsetting Howard. Howard then enters her room and asks her about his mannequin, so Sabrina tells him that it looked scary at night so she got rid of it. Howard tells her that should have at least asked him first as it was a companion to him, just like Wilson was to Tom Hanks. Howard explains that it didn't feel so lonely when he would think it as a real person. Hearing his explanation, Sabrina tells him that she'll bring it back, but Howard tells her to not bother as he can do it himself. While Howard leaves, he thinks to himself Sabrina is already messing with him at the beginning of the day. To add to his frustrations, Howard remembers how he had collected some special guns from a police station and put them in a box. However, he just realized a fully loaded QSC-92 automatic pistol has gone missing. Knowing that Sabrina must have taken it, Howard walks up to her and she asks him that wasn't he going out to scout for life supplies. The angry Howard ignores her question and tells her that after careful consideration, he suggests that the two of them do their laundry and cooking separately. Sabrina asks him why, so he answers so that the two see each other less often. That way she won't have to stay alert all the time and have to defend herself. This would also allow Howard to not feel awkward when he sees her. Sabrina responds that he should put himself in her shoes. She's a woman and he's a man, so she obviously has to protect herself. She then asks Howard that can't he behave like a gentleman, so he replies angrily that he knows she's a rich and pretty woman and that her position in the company is higher than his own. Howard continues that this must make him deserving of insult, and he should do just as Sabrina commands. He vents even more and tells Sabrina that her sense of security is built on his own suffering, so why should he let her? As Sabrina tries to muster up a reply, Howard shoots down her answer and tells her that she doesn't need to worry as he won't hurt her, but he can't be the gentleman that she wishes he would be. Howard then taunts Sabrina and tells her that she should get over herself and be just a bit more pragmatic. As Howard leaves his building, he tells us that it's been 120 days since the game started. The place has changed a lot compared to how it was just 3 months ago as the weather is getting cooler, and the sickening smell has disappeared. Sabrina has lined the street with plants and the neighborhood now looks like a paradise. Thanks to her management skills, the vegetable garden is now thriving and the food crisis has been solved. However, Howard still hasn't talked to Sabrina since their first argument, which makes him wonder if people really can't talk with anyone for 3 whole months, resigning to the fact he knows he himself can't. Howard takes a seat inside his car and starts talking to his bestie mannequin, Donald. He asks him if Sabrina broke her brain when she fought the mice in the garden, as it seems she no longer needs a social life. He continues that today they need to find meat and wonders if eating maggot-filled canned meat will make him sick. Howard contemplates eating mice but realizes that it could kill him if their germs or viruses enter his body. Eliminating all these options, Howard decides to go fishing, but before he does that, he'll visit his old friend as well. At the petting zoo, Howard cuddles the dummy, the tiger, and asks how its day went. He's surprised it has survived so long and remembers that just 2 months ago, he saw it sitting in front of the zoo gate as all the herbivores in the zoo had become its food. Luckily, Dummy doesn't attack humans, so Howard occasionally gives it food like mice and stray pets. As he's feeding the tiger, it pounces off and attacks a roaming deer. Howard realizes that it must be a wild deer as they have antlers, which must mean that nature has invaded human civilization. Suddenly it starts raining and Howard questions if a storm is coming. He realizes it's a typhoon, so he runs to his car and under its shelter starts asking how a Force 10 typhoon is possible within inner land. Howard then remembers he's still within a game and this could be a challenge by it. Concerned, Howard thinks back to how Sabrina rides a bike to the mountains every day and she should be reaching its peak by now. Howard drives off and comes home where he calls out to Sabrina but finds out that she isn't home at all. As thunder starts brewing, Howard goes to the mountain where he sees an injured Sabrina standing by a pole. Howard picks her up and Sabrina asks him if she'll die in this place, to which he replies no she won't. With such an exciting ending with our two main characters finally having the chance to grow close together.